Ben Golden here. I'm the Director of Technology for Aware Web Solutions, and I've been a Sitecore MVP since 2008. In this video, I'm going to introduce a project I've been working on called Sitecore Base Layouts. Let's start with a little background. Sitecore normally provides two places for you to store presentation settings. First is the template standard values. This provides a place for you to store default presentation components that are then shared between all items that are based on that template. Using the template standard values is a best practice established by Sitecore with the goal of allowing you to define those presentation components in as few places as possible. As we'll see shortly, I believe that this best practice is a little bit out of date. Then there's also the individual items. When you edit an item in Page Editor or in the device editor, it calculates the difference between those settings and those defined on the template standard values. Then that difference is saved as a layout delta on the item. There are several problems with this architecture. First, the template standard values can't be managed by your average user. Normally, it's either going to be a developer or an admin user who manages those settings. Also, using Page Editor only modifies the settings on one item. Since users can't share those settings with other items, they may end up making the same set of changes across many items. Also, layout deltas are only calculated from the top-level template. This leads to what we call page type templates, where you have a given template that has fields and presentation components that are specific to just that page type. You may also end up with templates that have no fields and whose only purpose is to define those presentation settings. Either way, what you end up with is a situation where you're repeating the same presentation settings on many different standard values items. The solution I've come up with is to separate the presentation settings from the template. This is done using a standard values provider that has special logic for the layout fields. A user is allowed to select which item its layout delta is calculated against. So essentially, the request for standard values is redirected to the item selected by the user. What this gives you is the ability to have normal users set up renderings in Page Editor that can then be shared across many different items. It also allows you to have multiple levels of inheritance or delta calculations. This lets you create hierarchies of presentation settings. Let's take a closer look. Here we have the current code for the base layout standard values provider. In our override of the getStandardValue method, we first check to see that the field is a layout field and that the item supports base layouts. Now, if there's a circular reference in the base layout field, it can lead to an infinite loop and a Stack Overflow. So we have a check here to prevent that. If those checks pass, the request is delegated to another class, the base layout value provider. This class is very simple. It just looks at the base layout field on the item. If it's null, it simply returns null. If an item is selected in the base layout field, it gets the layout value from that item. Back in our standard values provider, you'll see that if a value is returned from the base layout value provider, that is what is used. Otherwise, the request is sent on to the inner standard values provider. Setting up the base layout standard values provider as a decorator allows it to work alongside other standard values providers like the field fallback provider. So over in Sitecore, you'll see we have the base layout template. It has just a single drop link field that allows the user to select the item that's used as the base layout. For this demo, I've also created a simple page template that inherits that base layout template. It has a standard values item, but it only defines the main layout and some placeholder settings. Up in the content area, you'll see that in order to save time, I've set up some content ahead of time. Here in this base layouts folder, I've created a few page items that are going to act as our base layouts. And then I've also created a page up here that's going to act as our page item. So first, let's go in and set up our global base layout. So you'll see here that our layout just defines a single placeholder. So I'm going to go ahead and add some rows. And to the top row, I'm going to add a panel that could represent the header for your site. And then I'll also add another panel in the bottom row that might represent the footer. So that's good for our global base layout. Go ahead and close that. And then I'll go in and set up a 2-column layout. So you'll see initially we have only what is defined on the standard values item. But here we've created a ribbon button that opens a dialog allowing you to select a base layout. I'm going to go ahead and select the global base layout. And you'll see immediately I get the components that I defined there. So now I'm going to go ahead and add some additional components to this middle row. So first I'll do a 2-column row. And then in the first column, I'll add a panel that could represent like a secondary navigation. So that's pretty good for a 2-column base layout. And now for the 3-column. Again, I'm going to select the global base layout. And then I'll add the 3-column row. Again, I need to add the left navigation component. And then in the right column, I'll add a panel that could represent a promo. And that's pretty good for our 3-column base layout. Now for an actual page. So for this page, I'm going to select the 2-column base layout. And you'll see I've got both the components that were defined in my global base layout, as well as the ones that were defined in the 2-column base layout. So here in the 2nd column, I'm going to add a panel that could represent your body content. And there you go. Now I've got a page set up using the 2-column layout. But let's say later on I decide that I really need to have a promo on this page. So I want to change this to a 3-column. So I'm just going to go in here and select the 3-column base layout. And there you go. Now I have 3 columns with the promo that was selected on that 3-column base layout. So now I'll go ahead and add another rendering over in this right column. So now I have a pretty good looking 3-column page. So I hope you can see how base layouts can really give more control and flexibility back to your users. Thanks for watching.